For a long time, something about the story of the crucifixion of Jesus has bothered me. It's the two men who were crucified with Christ. What were their offenses? What crimes had they committed that deserved the death penalty? The Gospels and most of our English versions refer to them as thieves or robbers. And for a long time, that has puzzled me. In the Roman justice system, was simply stealing actually regarded as a capital offense, deserving the death penalty? That didn't seem quite right. So what was it these two had done that one of them would say, "We are receiving what we deserve for our crimes"? Well, let's take a look. We go to BibleHub.com/interlinear. Click on the Greek interlinear chapters. We're going to start in Gospel of Matthew. The story of the crucifixion of Jesus is in chapter 27. And the verse reference to those who were crucified with Jesus is in verse 38, right here. Reading from the interlinear translation that was offered for us. At the same time, two robbers are crucified with him. The word translated here as robbers is leistai. And let's look this up in the lexicon by clicking on Strong's Concordance number. And the dictionary form is leistes. The definitions offered here are robber, bandit, brigand. It is derived from the Greek verb lestauo, meaning to plunder or to rob. Now, I'd like to further investigate that verb lestauo, but unfortunately we won't find it in this lexicon or concordance since it's a word that is not used in the New Testament. But if we scroll down here to the usage section, we find more helpful information. The term leistes refers to a person who engages in robbery or banditry, often with violence or threat. In the New Testament, it is used to describe individuals who steal through force or intimidation, distinguishing them from common thieves, kleptes, who may act more covertly. Already we are beginning to see here that this term used to describe the two men who were crucified with Jesus means a whole lot more than simply thieves who take what does not belong to them. Their thievery involved violence, bodily injury, or worse. Let's check it out for ourselves by looking at the concordance and examine some of the verses where the noun leistes is used. First is Matthew chapter 21, verse 13. It's the story of Jesus driving out the money changers and sellers of animals from the temple courtyard, where Jesus said, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a speileon, leiston, a den of robbers." I'm curious about this word speileon. So here's a quick navigation guide. I'm going to highlight this word I'm going to look for. Hit Control-C to copy that. Open the chapter in the Greek text. Hit Control-F to search or find. And hit Control-V to paste, and it takes us immediately to this verse. And here we find this phrase, speileon leiston. And to look up this word speileon, I click on the Strong's Concordance number, and we find that it is a noun. That means cave, den, or hideout. Modern-day cave explorers get the name of their trade from this Greek word speileon. Robbers who band together and hide out in caves are not your casual neighborhood shoplifters or porch pirates. These are really nasty, dangerous people. As we see here down in Luke chapter 10, verse 30. This is the parable of the man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho who was attacked by leistais, bandits, who stripped him, beat him, and left him half dead. These were the kind of men who were crucified with Jesus. There's one more verse I want to look at in this study. It's in John chapter 18, verse 40. The Gospel of John refers to Barabbas as a lestes, a robber or bandit. Both the Gospels of Mark and Luke further tell us that Barabbas committed murder in the insurrection. Based on what we now know about the two men who were crucified with Jesus, I think we are justified in wondering if perhaps these two might have been associates of Barabbas, and if perhaps before that day dawned, the Roman officers had already scheduled 3 crucifixions, 3 crosses, one reserved for Barabbas. But Jesus took his place. A fitting illustration for how on the cross Jesus also took our place. And as for that one murderous bandit, who in his public execution was given the honor of dying alongside his Savior, and knew it, if there's grace in that hour for the likes of him, there's also grace before the throne of God for us. Well, now my question about the two crucified with Jesus has been answered, but there remains 2 loose ends. First is to find out what the other 3 Gospels have to say about the men who were crucified with Jesus. What words or phrases do Mark, Luke, and John use to describe their offenses? Well, if you've already watched the other videos in this series, by now you should have a handle on how to navigate the Bible Hub Interlinear. So I leave it to you as your homework to explore those other 3 Gospels and see what they say in answer to the question, what did those 2 men do to deserve the death penalty? The second loose end came unraveled as I was preparing the study, and I found it back here in the concordance under lestes, Matthew chapter 26, verse 55. And let's go take a look at that. I'm going to highlight the word I want to find. Hit Control-C to copy. Open the Greek text. Hit Control-F to find, and Control-V to paste. And here we are immediately in verse 55. And reading from the English translation offered for us in the interlinear, in that hour Jesus said to the crowds, as against lestes, a robber, did you come out with swords and xulon, clubs, to capture me. Yet when I read this in the New International Version, it says, am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Based on what we have already learned about the meaning of this word lestes, the NIV translation of this verse does not appear to be quite accurate. Granted, the Gospels of Mark and Luke refer to the bandit Barabbas as an insurrectionist, but the term they use to describe him as such is an entirely different word. So as I was getting ready to go public with my challenge to the NIV's translation of this verse in Matthew 26, I felt it wise to consult the Bauer Arndt Gingrich lexicon, which I bought 55 years ago when I was a college sophomore. This is a deeper lexicon that is not simply for the New Testament, but also includes other early Christian Greek literature which might further enlighten us. It's that larger pool of ancient texts that gives us even more clarity on the meaning, use, and application of the vocabulary of the Greek New Testament. And here we learn what we already know, that lestes primarily means robber, highwayman, bandit, and we find lestes used in this way not only in the New Testament, but also in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures on which the apostles often relied when quoting the Old Testament, and also in the historical writings of Josephus, a Roman military officer whose own Jewish parents were living in Jerusalem when Jesus ministered among them. But this is not the only way that Josephus used this word leistes. In several contexts, he also used this word to refer to revolutionaries and insurrectionists, those who participate in civil rebellion, as Barabbas did. Under any totalitarian regime, insurrection is automatically met with the death penalty. So, based on the way Josephus uses this word leistes, we must concede that the NIV translation of that word in Matthew 26 as one who is leading a rebellion is plausible. The irony in that is that it is we who have rebelled against God and His authority in our lives, and it was Jesus, by His submission to His Father's will, who wins us back. And thank you for watching.